video and audio recording of the entire webinar, which we will be putting up on our website after the fact, probably early next week. So if you want to catch it again, or if you have to jump off early, that will be made available. I think last year's webinar, which is largely similar to this one with a couple of tweaks, will also be available. I'm going to have everybody muted for the beginning part of this webinar. There is a questions feature in your little GoToWebinar toolbar there, and you can feel free to post questions on there. I'm going to probably answer questions at the end as opposed to during the middle of the presentation, since we'll probably address most of them in the presentation. I will then I will unmute everybody's phones at the end as well, so you can ask questions that way too. So just a little bit about who I am and who we are, just to start. So I'm Tom Amder. I'm the Executive Director of NH&RA, and I've been coordinating the Timmy Awards now for 8 years. So it's been a lot of fun. Actually, one of the most fun things that we get to do as an organization is look through all your great applications. They're really a pretty impressive lot. We don't have any judges on the webinar this year, although it's possible they may be joining us later. But I've been involved in all the judging discussions for the last 8 years, and hopefully we'll be able to represent them well. Unfortunately, there were some last-minute scheduling conflicts that prevented them from attending. So also, in addition to the recording, we'll also make the PowerPoint that the webinar is based on available on the website. All right. So what are we going to be covering? I'm going to provide you with a little bit of background on the actual awards and who Tim was, a little bit of an overview on the actual application process. The red flags, this is really the key part of the webinar. This is your tips and hints and most common mistakes. We'll also, at the end of the webinar, just show you a couple of the winning projects from last year, and then obviously we'll take some Q&A. So the Timmy Awards were first started in 2005, and they're in memory of the late Boston architect, J. Timothy Anderson. For those of you who've been involved in NH&RA for a long time, you'll remember Tim, but he was really a seminal figure in the world of adaptive reuse and historic preservation. What makes these awards a little bit different than some of the other preservation awards out there is that in addition to them having a preservation orientation, they're also really development awards. So it's not just about architecture, it's about the whole development process, putting together the financing, dealing with all the development and construction challenges, and ideally putting together a sustainable and successful piece of real estate. So that's really a key part of the overall judging and the general context which you should be thinking about as you submit your applications. So obviously you can see we're also looking at design and quality and interpretation of the historic elements and that sort of preservation emphasis. But just as much and just as important is the impact on the community, the actual construction and use of building materials, again, financial success and sustainability. Again, so Tim really set the stage for adaptive reuse around the country. We've highlighted a couple of his, more important projects in the Boston area for the most part, but he really led the way in taking historic properties and converting them to housing and other uses. So the Prince Spaghetti building, for those of you in Boston, is a really cool project, and I recommend you all take a look at it. He wasn't just recognized by our community, but also by the AIA, most notably as a fellow, which is a very hard distinction to achieve at the American Institute of Architects. So here are the nuts and bolts. Please make sure you get us your applications by July 20th, 2012. If you postmark it by then, I guess that's okay, but honestly, it would be much better for us processing-wise if you could get it to us a little bit sooner. We are going out to our summer meeting the following week, out on Martha's Vineyard. And if you want to get a timely notification that your application's been received, it'd be great if you could get it to us on that Friday as opposed to postmarked then. You can download all the application materials at the link on the website here. There is an application fee, and if you could please send us everything on CD-ROM, here's the address obviously. If you want to put it on a flash drive as an alternative, if that's easier, that would also be okay. But we do need it in digital format. You can send us a print application if you want in addition, but we have our judges dispersed all over the country, and we like to basically send them the file. So that's certainly not necessary to send it in print at all. This year's categories are actually the same as last year, and I'm just going to go through them really quickly, and I'll make a couple of notes here and there. So the first category is best commercial, retail, and/or non-residential project. So I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but the idea is that this is not an apartment complex. The next two categories where we tend to get the most applications are historic rehabs that involve tax credits. The small category is under $5 million in total development cost, and the large category is over $5 million. Obviously, the next one is pretty straightforward, historic rehab utilizing the new market tax credit. The reason we have this category is because a lot of these deals are increasingly using new market tax credits, but also because National Housing and Rehab Association has a new market tax credit working group, and this is a nice way to highlight some of the projects that people are using there. Number 5, the market rate and/or mixed income residential. This is really for projects that are primarily have a large market rate component. So if you have a project that's essentially 100% affordable, but it has one market rate, unit for the resident manager or something like that, you should really apply under the tax credit, the low-income housing tax credit categories. This is for properties that have a substantial market rate component. All right. So the best historic rehab involving new construction has to have a separate new construction component to it. We're going to address that a little bit later in the red flag, so I'm going to leave it right there. Most innovative adaptive reuse. So this is obviously a category for projects that are taking a building's original use and converting it into something substantially different. So an example might be a warehouse into loft apartments, or office building into apartments, for example. The final two categories are a little bit different. These are our judges' categories. And how you apply for these is you actually submit in one of the first 7 categories, and the judges will actually select out of the total applicant pool finalists and winners in the last 2 judges' categories. So they're the most advanced financial structure and also achievement and sustainability. And that sustainability is really focused on energy and energy efficiency and green-related developments. All right, so how projects get scored. I think this slide is pretty self-explanatory. I would say, although it doesn't look like it's the most points, when we sit on the judges' calls, I think that the real difference maker tends to be, I'm going to try to highlight this, the financial market and success category. This is really what separates the the winning applications from those that come up a little bit short in the end. So when you're preparing your application, I would just pay special attention over here. This checklist, again, is pretty self-explanatory, but we see mistakes in it almost every year, so I'll go through it pretty quickly. Obviously, please complete the entire application and fill out the entire form and include all the attachments. It's not convenient for us or the judges to go hunting for missing items, and it may end up disqualifying your application if you don't include everything. You want to definitely include an impact photo. This is generally sort of a a summary photo of the finished transaction. probably should not be a rendering, an architectural rendering. We'd like to see the actual project if possible. And I'm going to show you some pictures towards the end of the presentation that will demonstrate this. So the narrative statement, we'll talk about this a little bit more in the red flag section 2, but please keep within the word limit. The judges are going to be reviewing a lot of applications, and while the narrative statement is probably one of the most important parts of the application, we're not looking for an encyclopedia either. The roster of all the parties involved in the transaction. This is very helpful for us on a couple of levels. One, it helps us, market to the participants, about whether or not they're involved in a project that's a finalist or a winner. But it also really helps us to understand the complexity of the deal if we know what types of, who did the financing and, what types of consultants and whatnot are involved. So if you can include contact information in that roster, that's very helpful for us. The press clippings and marketing materials, really they should be considered supplemental materials. You'll want to get the most important things out in the narrative statement, and you might even refer to the press clippings or marketing materials in your statement. But they really should be supplementing the application, not the sort of main body of it. I would also include some supporting photos. What's very helpful for us is before and after type pictures, but also, this would be the area where you could have, I guess, some renderings. We do want to have a very complete picture of the financing involved on the project. So that would include sources and uses. An operating pro forma is good in helping us understand whether the project's going to be financially successful. And ideally, if there's one available, an operating statement as well. Also, just a brief description of all the programs and resources used. So obviously, the historic tax credit is probably going to be something, but if you're using Section 8 or federal home loan grant money or a local preservation grant or Hope 6 or anything else, you definitely want to include that as an attachment. So we will be presenting the finalists and winners with awards at our Boston meeting this fall. That's October 29th and 30th. The conference itself is being held at the Langham Hotel, although I believe the Timmy Awards will be, the Timmy Awards presentation and luncheon will be held next door in the auditorium and meeting space in the Bank of America building. All that information will be on our website. All right, so things to be aware of when you're preparing your presentation. I mentioned this already, but the narrative statement is really the critical document within the application. This is your opportunity to let us know what's special about your deal, what challenges you were able to overcome, and really tie in all the various components. Again, the financing is a really critical submission in the application. This is really the tool that we use to determine whether or not the project is financially successful, which again, as I mentioned in the beginning, is really the difference maker between those that win and those that don't. The judges award categories, again, you want to be submitting in one of those first 7 categories, and the judges will be selecting who will be finalists or winners in the judges award categories. Certainly you could mention if you think your project should be considered in the most advanced financial structure or the sustainability category in your narrative statement, but you will want to apply under one of those other categories. Just a quick note about the new construction again. We're talking about an exterior piece of new construction, not interior renovations. So there really needs to be a substantive new building or new attachment or atrium or something like that. Just actual interior renovations would not qualify as new construction. So this is just some ideas of things you might want to consider using in your narrative statement. I wouldn't limit yourself to this, but I think this is certainly helpful for the judges. So you obviously want to have a little bit of background on the actual property, both in terms of its historical nature, but also how you guys came upon it from a developer perspective. This is the place where you're going to want to talk about the challenges you overcame in actually developing the property, and it could be something specific to the actual preservation or rehabilitation of the property, or the complex financing, NIMBY issues that you were able to overcome, or anything else. But this is definitely some of the types of things you'd want to include. If there are particular items in the sources and uses that are notable, I would certainly refer to it in the narrative statement, but please do include the full itemization, in the attachment. Any other notable programs or resources you used, you probably want to highlight. The financial success, you know, a lot of times you need to explain the operating documents or the lease-up success. That's definitely something else you're going to want to highlight. And obviously any innovative rehabilitation techniques or you know, tools or technology used, whether it might be solar panels or some special replacement window or the like. You know, this would be a great place to highlight it. You do want to demonstrate that you were in compliance with the Secretary's standards, especially if you didn't use the historic tax credit. In practice, I think we've only received over the last 8 years maybe 2 applications that were not historic tax credit financed, but this is the standard that we're using in terms of preservation. And any particular challenges that you had in terms of meeting the Secretary's standards, this would be a good thing to highlight. Anything sort of innovative, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. And you know, just in generally why you wanted to do this project and, you know, why it was compelling from your perspective. You definitely want to highlight that. So it's a lot of information to try to, yeah, sorry, the last one. This is especially relevant for the new markets tax credit category, but I think more generally, if you can explain how this project was a catalyst in the community, whether it was creating jobs or spurring additional development in the surrounding area, that's definitely something that the judges will look upon favorably. It is a lot of information to try to jam into 750 words, and we're sort of cognizant of that, but try to please include as much as you can and obviously be efficient. I think I actually covered this slide already. So I mentioned this earlier. Here are some sort of sample attachments. I think they're of a building from a property that won a couple of years ago. Pretty self-explanatory. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about sort of the history of the judges' categories. You know, we as an organization pride ourselves in you know, sharing innovative financing techniques. That's really the hallmark of NH&RA. And that's why we created this most advanced financial structure category. As things have gotten harder, especially since the financial downturn, developers in particular have had to be just more and more creative in order to get their deals done. And you know, we wanted to acknowledge that creativity by having this most advanced financial structure category. You know, it's pretty interesting when you dig into some of these historic deals. They may have 13, 14, 15 layers of financing involved. Those are the type of properties that will be particularly competitive in this financial structure judges award. At the same time, green has been a high priority for our organization as well. We formed about 3 years ago now our Council for Energy-Friendly Affordable Housing, which has been a group that we've really used to spearhead energy efficient policy with the federal government. And it's also been a major priority of our historic tax credit working group over the years. So we wanted to particularly highlight green historic transactions, which from a practical perspective can be a little bit more challenging to get that LEED standard or that enterprise green community standard because of the inherent challenges in rehabbing. So we wanted to acknowledge that. I mentioned already about the new construction category, but again, just to highlight that, we're really looking at substantial new construction that's incorporated into a historic preservation. So, you know, the context with the original historic property is going to be important in this category, and it should be again a substantial piece of new construction. You know, if it's a historic building and you just attached a new shed on the back or something like that, that's probably should be submitted under a different category. So just a couple of tips. Some of this is rehash, but it's helpful for us when you're actually submitting the application, if you can submit it all as a single file, ideally a PDF as opposed to separate files for each attachment and each attachment and the actual application. I would include the photos separately, however, and if you could include them as JPEGs or PNG files as opposed to Adobe Acrobat files, that would be ideal. Again, you can only submit under one category. The judges may decide that they want to consider your application under a different category or for one of the judges' awards, but please don't submit the same application multiple times. Again, you want to have a complete and thoughtful narrative statement. This really is the difference maker in a lot of applications, and you want to you know, address as much as possible in there. Each year we tend to get all the applications, you know, clustered. They all come in right around the actual deadline, and there's always a couple of people that send it in late. I want to urge you to start soon and get your applications to us early. We're unable to consider applications that come in you know, beyond that deadline, just by virtue of the fact that you know, we want this to be a fair competition. So please make sure that you start your application soon, and if you want to get it to us, you know, a week or two in advance, you know, that's very helpful. I mentioned this before. Also, don't rely too heavily on the press or news clippings. They're really supportive documents. They're not the substance of your application. That's going to be your narrative statement and those key attachments that we already mentioned. So they should be supporting what you're saying, but not in substitute for a good narrative statement. Okay. Again, you know, these are historic tax credit awards, so you definitely want to highlight, you know, the tax credits that are involved, whether they're state or federal. And let's see here. You know, I think the rest of this is going to be pretty self-explanatory. I will highlight this last item, though. You know, the photographs or, you know, other visual supporting material is really helpful for the judges in having, you know, and really understanding the context of the property and even the neighborhood. So don't skimp on them. I would submit the full amount if you can, and try to submit different types of pictures too. You'll want to have a good mix of exterior and interior pictures. You want to have certainly before and afters, and it's even helpful to have you know, a site plan if it's a multiple building complex, or you know, how it fits into the surrounding neighborhood. That definitely is a good piece of insight for the judges. So these are just a sample of some of the projects that won last year. As you can see, these are national awards. We've got a particularly diverse array of projects that came in last year, which we were really happy about. Here are some samples of some of the impact photos as well. And a couple more interior photos. All right. I should have probably mentioned this in the beginning, but we've been very lucky to have a sponsor through all 8 years of this competition, and that's been the National Trust for the National Trust Community Investment Corporation, which has been our proud partner at HPDC and with the Timmy Awards. You can certainly follow up with us after the fact. Please either give myself or my colleague Caitlin a call or shoot us an email if you have any questions about the application process. And I will open it up right now to see if there's any additional questions. I don't see any submitted online so far, and what I'm going to try to do is open up the conference call line. So just bear with me 1 second. Well, shoot. I don't seem to be able to unmute all of your lines, so if you do have any questions, if you could please use the question or chat box in your GoToWebinar toolbar. We'll be here for a while, so please just feel free to chime in. All right, got our first question. This is an easy one. Will you be making the slides available? Absolutely. We will probably have the slides up on the Timmys website probably this afternoon, and certainly no later than Monday. There's also something I neglected to mention, but I think will be very helpful for all of you, and that's that we have a frequently asked questions section on the Timmy Awards webpage, and I would urge you to take a good close look at that at those FAQs. They answer a lot of the most common questions that we get every year, and we did update them from last year as well. So that's a good resource for you. Are there any other questions? All right, looks like we got another one. Are letters of support encouraged? You know, I think that would be a fine thing to include as an attachment. I don't think that we have anything specifically in the application package that, you know, it's not technically a, you know, news clipping or whatever, but I think that that is a fine thing to include. And actually, I think we'll update the materials on the website to suggest that if you want to include that, please do so. All right, looks like we got another question here. 1 second. Okay. Okay, so yeah, here's a little bit of confusion. So the application says to embed photos in the application file, but it seems to say here that you want to include those separately. Yeah, let me revise what I said before. You know, please do embed the photos into the application file, but we'd also like to have them saved separately as JPEGs or PNG files. And the reason we use that is we will be printing write-ups of the finalists and winners in various publications that we have, and we want to be able to access a web and print worthy photo. You'll also be having a release within the application for use of photos. And we certainly encourage you to do so, especially if you're a winner or finalist. We want to give you all the PR due. So sorry about the confusion on that. Okay, are there any other questions? Well, what I think I will do is I'll hang on for another minute or two just in case there's any late coming questions. But if there aren't any more, I want to thank you all for joining us. I hope you found this helpful. Again, please feel free to contact us with any questions whatsoever, whether it has anything to do with your application or whether you think your project would qualify. Please make sure you read all the application materials pretty closely. There are date ranges in terms of when the project was placed in service. You want to make sure that your project is going to be eligible. And again, please take a look at those FAQs. They probably will answer a lot of your other potential questions out there. I guess I should also mention a little bit about the judges. The panel of judges that we have a pretty diverse background that I think is really pretty perfect for the Timmy Awards. We have trained architect who specializes in historic preservation, and that's Carl Stump with RTKL. Nick Ratty with the Resnick Group, who structures a lot of these tax credit transactions. John Kelly with Nixon Peabody, who's an attorney up in New York and past president of NH&RA. Josh Anderson, who's actually the son of Tim Anderson and a developer. Lisa Craig, who has had a couple of different roles in the industry in the past few years, but was formerly the preservation SHPO for the District of Columbia, was a developer with Forest City, and now is the preservation officer for the city of Annapolis. And then we have Brad White with Brad White & Associates up in Chicago, again is another developer with a rich experience in the historic preservation world. He also sits on the Advisory Council for Historic Preservation. So a wealth of experience in the judges, and we're very grateful to have them each year. Okay, well, not seeing any other questions, I want to thank you all again for making yourselves available for this webinar. Again, I hope you found it helpful. If you have questions later and want to follow up with us, please by all means do. We're here, regular working hours, and look forward to seeing all your applications in a couple weeks. So thanks a lot, and have a great weekend.